Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of The Currency of Anarchy. I'm Thomas Shane.
And I'm Josh Davis.
We were going to have a guest on today, but it fell through, so it's just going to be me and Josh again, so you're stuck with us. Basically, today I wanted to be talking about, I wanted to focus the show today on gun control, everybody's favorite hot button issue, gun control and kind of prohibition in general, and just the effects that it has on society as a whole and on the activities that it's intended to stop. So, what kind of brought me up on this was it's kind of something I feel passionately about. Just kind of like you hear about the shooting. There were shootings yesterday in Las Vegas, and the guy up in Canada going around shooting. Everybody was shooting cops apparently, but not that I condone that. But and then the whole Elliot Rodger thing. So basically, whenever you can't help but notice it, whenever a mass shooting happens, which doesn't even really mean much because technically, if 2 or more people are killed by a gun, it's considered a mass shooting. So the Elliot Rodger thing in Santa Barbara was considered a mass shooting, even though only 2 people were killed by guns. I believe three people were killed by knives. Like 4 people were run over by his car, but that's besides the point. But anytime something like that comes up, or even a school shooting, Sandy Hook, anything, people always start talking about gun control. It's inevitable. You can turn on the news like clockwork, and there'll be somebody on TV giving some big emotional rant about how guns are the problem and about how it's too damn easy for people to get guns in this country. And your gun rights don't trump my rights to feel safe and my rights to be alive. And it's inevitable. And you just can't help but notice it, and you notice all the fear-mongering, and you think to yourself, are these people actually thinking about any of this that they're saying, or are they just giving some law, they're just making some decision based entirely on emotion? So
Yeah,
I don't know if you can comment on that at all, on the fear-mongering and the, make decisions with, based off your emotions. Don't think about it logically,
Right. It is all based on fear. And the government just uses fear in general in order to bring about whatever they want. And what they want is to get rid of guns outright, except in the hands of police and any other government official. They keep on giving guns to new government groups, especially like, what was it, the Department of Agriculture lately, I think it was, about a week ago or something, they asked for it. But yeah, they keep on giving it to more government institutions, but basically, yes, they use that fear, that emotion, the appeal to wanting to be protected in order to get rid of the logic that, well, if you just give it to a certain group of people, they're going to coerce you and force you to do things you don't want, and it builds up the empire and all that. That's where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with that totally, and it's funny because so when the government is always talking about gun control, I feel like most people within government seem to be for gun control, at least in front of the camera they are. I don't know about their personal politics, but obviously that goes aside when you become a politician. It's all about the partisan, ideology and going along with your party. But yeah, it's funny because they try to come across as, guns are the problem, which actually statistically they're not. And if you examine the data, anytime first of all, gun control laws, people like to believe that they work, but they don't, because laws don't apply to criminals. That's why they're criminals. They're not obtaining their weapons through legal means. They're not going to register them with the state. So basically all it does is create a bunch of unnecessary victims through a bunch of legislation. So they pass a bunch of legislation, turns everybody, basically it furthers the extortion racket, because you have to pay these registration fees, you have to pay licensing fees, you have to go through the bureaucracy, and then so basically you're putting more money into their pockets that generate more revenue off the crimes that people are now committing by being in possession of certain firearms. So by owning certain property, they are now, being extorted by the police departments. And So they try to come across as anti-gun, but they're not. They're the furthest thing from anti-gun, because what is a government without guns? Nothing.
Right.
They have no power without the guns aimed at everybody. So, you know, uh, there's the whole argument where no one is really anti-gun, because if you're just because you're anti-gun, it doesn't mean that you're anti-gun for everybody. It just means that you're for certain men coming to my house to take my guns with guns. So you're only anti certain people having guns, if that were the problem. And secondly, I kind of lost my train of thought for a second, but secondly, it's the fact that if you look at the statistics of when gun control legislation is implemented, violent crimes almost always go up. Violent murders and gun-related deaths almost always go up. So the idea that less guns equals less crime is a myth. It's the exact opposite. All you're doing is creating legislation that strips guns away from the hands of ordinary law-abiding citizens, and taking away their means of protecting themselves from violent crimes being perpetrated against them. So now they need to rely on the state even more. They need to rely on the police to come and help them and save them every time they have a problem, instead of just defending themselves, with a firearm. I always think about when rampage shooters happen, and not too long ago, where I live, one of the next county over, there was a mall, and somebody walked in. This kid walked into the mall. I actually went to high school with him. Walked into the mall, pulled out some guns and shot a bunch of people. And I always just think about how much shorter his rampage could have been, or just any rampage shooter ever. Elliot Rodger, if somebody had a gun and had fired back at him, because obviously rampage shooters, spree shooters, are going to focus on soft targets. They want people that they know are probably not armed, probably not going to be able to defend themselves, and they're unsuspecting. They're not going to walk into a shooting range. There's a reason shooting ranges don't get shot up. They're not going to walk in somewhere where they know a lot of people are armed and are willing to defend themselves, and that's exactly why towns with more guns, with less gun regulations, have lower levels of violent crime and crime rates in general, property crimes, because nobody wants, if you have a suspicion that you're going to try to rob or invade their home or perpetrate some violent crime against them or property crime against them, if you know that there's a good chance that they might have a gun and be willing to defend themselves, you're probably going to find a different target, right?
Right.
So I don't know. What's your perspective on that?
I remember talking one time with someone that lived in Australia, and he said that it was more peaceful in Australia because there are, guns are outlawed. People don't own guns. Even thieves don't have guns. Well, how do you know? Is my question. And I feel bad because I never took a look at the statistics compared to the United States, shooting-wise, that kind of thing. Obviously, it's a smaller population and a smaller area, but still, it would have been nice to compare some statistics in that sense. But it's funny to see what other people think about gun control in other areas. When you take a look at Sweden, they are pro-gun rights, and I believe that they have the lowest, or one of the lowest, crime rates in the world, if I remember correctly. Is that right? Isn't that right?
I think it's Switzerland.
Switzerland, excuse me.
One out of two people has a gun, and they have one of the lowest violent crime rates in the world.
Right, yeah. Based on that logic, if you compare to other governments, you start thinking, maybe gun rights is a decent idea, But, it's tough to talk to people when they don't look at statistics or aren't willing to open up to the idea at all. When you appeal to the logic enough, I think, it starts ringing a bell a little bit. But this is a hard topic to get into people's heads. I think it's easier to get into the idea of liberty in general if from a different topic. I'm not trying to dissuade the idea of gun rights because it's absolutely important. It's probably the most bedrock idea of liberty in the first place. But I think it's easier to persuade people to liberty from other topics. But that's all I'm trying to say. And I'm not trying to stop the conversation. I'm just trying to
Yeah. No,
point out.
yeah. Well, no, that's exactly it too. It's especially if you look at other governments, and if somebody won't examine the data behind what they're saying, there's
Yeah.
absolutely no point in having a conversation with someone about that, because anything that you say, they're going to refute by their own made-up logic. And a lot of times that's exactly what happens when people say less guns equals less crimes. But if you actually
Yeah.
look at the data and statistics, especially in other countries, like Russia and the United Kingdom, for instance, two countries who are notorious for their gun control laws, very, very strict. It's almost impossible to obtain a firearm legally. Um, they still have extremely high violent crime rates. I think Russia has a higher violent crime rate than we do, or just as equal, and they have some of the strictest gun laws there. And same with the United
Wow.
Kingdom. But that's people are also, you don't need a gun to kill someone. People are killed with knives. People are killed with cars. People die accidentally. People kill themselves by abusing medications and alcohol and smoking cigarettes and getting into car accidents and falling downstairs. You're so much more likely to die any other way than by a victim of a gunshot homicide. Yet people just can't help but they're just fixed on that one thing, and they do that with drugs too. And that's why I wanted to bring prohibition into this a little bit too as well, because when people are killing each other in mass murders, when people are abusing drugs and committing property crimes, people have a tendency to focus only on the objects being utilized to commit those crimes. Not that I don't consider drug use a crime, so let me reword that. But those undesirable behaviors by some of society. Um,
Yeah.
but
Victimless crimes.
yeah, yeah, they have a tendency to focus on the objects being used and not getting to the source of why they're being abused in the first place. They say people are killing each other with guns, take those guns away. Not, why does gun control always immediately come into it, and no one ever asks why are we killing each other more than in any other country? Why do Americans want to kill each other so bad? And people think that they can just ignore problems and paradoxes like that and just focus on the objects and take the objects away and legislate themselves into utopia and legislate the danger away. And it doesn't work like that. That's a quick fix. That's a non-answer to a serious problem. So
Right.
that's one of the biggest problems I have with gun control, is because it's a quick fix that doesn't work to a social problem that needs to be seriously examined, and all it does is create unnecessary victimless crimes and more innocent bystanders and people caught in the crosshairs and people's lives ruined through legislation that doesn't work. So
Yeah.
it's an unnecessary risk in my mind. And also, not to mention, not that I'm a constitutionalist, I can't make that clear enough. Uh, but the Second Amendment is a big deal to a lot of pro-gun supporters. I'm pro-gun because I believe in people's ability and rights to own, people's property. If you own something, it's your property. You can do what you want with it. I don't believe in people telling you that you can't have certain property that's not infringing upon anybody. But a lot of people are a common sentiment in the pro-gun movement is the Second Amendment, which pertains to self-defense. It has people try to bring up hunting all the time. I don't know why. It has nothing to do with hunting. It has to do with self-defense and self-preservation, and using it. And I read something recently that said, well, because it brought up the fact of why people bring assault rifles into question a lot. Why do you need a fully automatic assault rifle to defend yourself from an intruder or something? It's not just personal attacks as an individual. It's not just to defend yourself against muggings and common street crime. It's specifically in place to make sure that no government infringes on your right to defend yourself, your rights and ability to defend yourself from a military invasion, whether that's from a foreign force or your own government, specifically your own government. So that's why people need fully automatic assault rifles. And in my opinion, people need fully automatic assault rifles because why not? Because it's their property. Who are you to tell them otherwise? As long as they're not uh, causing any harm to anybody. I don't see, you know, people just want to preemptively punish people for crimes that they might commit and take the preemptive approach and take everyone's guns away because it might cause less crimes, which people know for a fact that they won't. It's just going to be the opposite. So the whole thing is just absolutely ridiculous to me. I can't, I can't even wrap my head around it.
Yeah, you were talking about the United Kingdom and how they have strict gun control and everything. I
Yeah.
just noticed that, as societies, go towards gun control, that creates the police state. You see all those cameras all over the streets, and I think the UK is the worst, if I remember correctly.
One of the
And
worst.
yeah, and uh, I don't know, drug control. They all contribute to the police state and all of this. And yeah, like you were saying, you can't legislate morality. You can't legislate away a thing. You can't legislate that to go away.
Yeah.
Uh, like drugs, marijuana especially, of all things, that just grows from the ground. I personally don't like marijuana, but who am I to say that you can't do your damn thing? It doesn't matter because it's not going to affect me. Even you can't legislate speeding away either. Like, when you're driving, like if you speed, you do it, and it's going to happen. And if the police don't catch you, then it happened. It was there. You can't legislate that away. Speed limit 65. You go 80. Who's to stop you?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. Uh, you know, the more positive laws that are created, the more things get screwed up, and that's why you and I are. Basically, I think this is one of the biggest reasons. This is why we're anarchists, because you can't legislate morality, you can't stop things from happening, in general, unless you can't stop a murder either. You can't prevent that from happening. You can, provide remedy in the law, but you can't stop it from happening. So I think that the more positive laws that come about, through prohibition or whatever, it just makes things worse, and people get sent to jail, and they lose, 5, 10 years of their lives, spent in jail for doing one harmless act, and it's absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
There's no correction. They call it a correction. But there is no correction, in my opinion.
Yeah. The correctional institution. Yeah.
Right.
I don't disagree with. I do believe that there's no correcting. That's if someone is to the point where they're I'm gonna go murder a bunch of people because X, Y, and Z. I don't believe that there's really any correction to that behavior. I mean, not that we know anyway, because most people that commit mass shootings are being seen by psychiatrists. They're being put on medication. So not that modern medicine can remedy, but
Right. That's what I meant.
that's the whole reason that I became an anarchist in the first place, is because I realized that I don't believe in telling other people what to do and how to behave and how to live their lives when they're not affecting me at any point in time. Just because they're engaging in an activity which I personally find I don't like it, or I find it wrong or something, they're not, as long as they're not hurting anybody, and that if other individuals are involved with them in an activity, that it's consensual. As long as everybody's consent is given, there's no reason to punish people or to take any action against people for selling drugs, prostitution, owning certain firearms, traffic violations, anything that doesn't produce a victim. All that is to me is more revenue generation for the state. It's part of the extortion racket. They like to play it off like, we're here to keep you safe. We write tickets to keep you safe. We incarcerate drug dealers to keep you safe. And any data that you look into on any of the contexts just suggests otherwise. It just suggests that nothing they're doing is really having an effect on any of this behavior. All they're doing is keeping up a charade to generate more revenue, to fund their power, and to expand their power. And that was, I saw something actually just the other day that was talking about why so many violent criminals are walking the streets. It was a video. Why so many violent criminals are walking the streets? And that's because most times law enforcement would rather go after people who are selling drugs, doing traffic violations, prostituting, doing your average everyday street crimes, because they're easier to first of all, they're easier to build a case on and catch these people. They're easier to get a prosecution on. It requires less work. Basically, hey, I caught you smoking, the wrong kind of plant from the ground, so now you owe us X amount of money, and if you don't pay us, you're going into a cage. So it's easier for them to do that and to sustain themselves than to go after murderers and rapists and serial killers and people that, they do that, but people that obviously requires a lot more work. It requires a lot more man hours. It requires a lot more paperwork, and there's a lot higher risk that nothing's going to come of it. So they need to make up the difference of those by busting people for doing things that are harming no one, by creating criminals, to extort them, to get more. It's all about getting more revenue into the system, in my opinion, and that's another big part of gun control. Is the regulation is just getting more money into the system. You can't have these guns. You can have these guns, but you have to pay us, X amount of money for this fee. You have to register it with this person. You have to pay them X amount of money. You have to pay all these fees and go through the bureaucracy, and it's just more. It's more revenue, more and more money, and all the while the American people think that it's all about protection. It's all under the guise of we're doing this for your own good,
Right.
That's the difference between the government and the mafia. The mafia doesn't extort you and break your kneecaps and then make you pay for the crutches and then tell you ought to be grateful for it and then tell you that it's for your own good. The mafia is at least up front with you.
Yeah, basic economics here. If as dealers go to jail, it's basically a risk game. Like, oh, can I stay outside of the cage today, and so there's an inherent risk in that black market, and the price of the item goes up. Like, I'm talking about drugs right now, but when guns become absolutely illegal in the United States, the same thing will happen, and the same thing happened with prohibition of alcohol back in the 30s or something, 20s. So it's so the price of the item must go up because there's a risk being taken, a non-natural risk. There's always a risk to every business, but this is something that is specific to those industries, if you will. So so the prices of the drugs, the prices of guns that are outlawed or whatever, they'll go up. And so as demand, it's because the demand goes up and the supply is probably about the same, right? So anyway, that's where I'm coming from too when it comes to economics. The druggies are spending like hundreds of dollars on things that should be probably like the price of a pack of cigarettes or something. That's where I'm coming from, economic-wise.
Yeah, because obviously the risk costs money. If there's a higher risk involved, people need to charge more. But yeah, I totally get where you're coming from. Demand creates supply inevitably. It will always happen. It always has happened. Even during Prohibition, people would find every single possible way around the Prohibition laws. So basically, making activities like drinking and drugs and things like that, things of that nature illegal, it doesn't make them go away. It just pushes them underground. it pushes them onto the black market where there will still be a supply. You will still be able to readily get them. I mean, look at drugs. Drugs are illegal. You can find almost any drug on the street. Guns are illegal. Guns aren't illegal, but I mean, just buying a gun from somebody off the street is illegal. But people do it every day anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it just pushes it underground and actually just kind of makes it a little more dangerous activity and a little bit less desirable because, you know, when you're buying drugs, instead of going into a store to buy drugs, you have to go to some, you know, creepy drug dealer in some subway tunnel or something, and you might get stabbed or, you know, and it just creates a lot of problems, and it creates a lot of needless victims of the state, and it creates a whole lot of revenue for the state, and at the cost of people's lives. People going to prison. I've heard of people going to prison for life for selling drugs, for voluntarily selling drugs to people that were voluntarily buying them. No act of aggression there whatsoever, except on the part of the state when they came in, decided that you can't do that, so now we're going to definitely ruin your life and put you in prison for the rest of it. It doesn't make any sense. Where's the morality there? Where's the, I mean...
Yeah, you know, the idea of legislating morality in that sense, you know, like people say that using drugs is immoral or something like that. And I think that they're coming from the perspective that the victim or the buyer, I should say, is imbibing or whatever these drugs, and so in effect it's hurting themselves. But that's their own. That's up to them if they want to do it. And you know, it's the same idea with alcohol. At least we came to our senses in that sense. But I think that people are so nanny state-ish that, you know, they want to get rid of drugs altogether. And in effect, it comes full circle. When you talk about gun rights, you know, some people will commit suicide using a gun, but you can't prevent that. You know, the people are going to commit suicide anyway. You know, and, you know, again, when you you know, supply a gun to a person, you don't know the actual intent of the person buying that gun. You know, you can basically it's just a matter of trust. You got to trust the person to know what they're doing with a gun. You know, you educate the person how to use it and when it is right and wrong to use that tool, but that's what it is. It's a tool. And I forget where I was going with this originally, but it's like drugs. It's always an item. It's just who uses what item, and I think, you know, drugs are like a vice, and I don't think of guns as a vice. A lot of people, you know, want to say that guns are immoral and all this, and at least they have a better case with drugs, sort of, but guns, it's just a defense tool, I think. I don't know where I'm going with this. I forgot where I was going. Sorry.
It's easy to get sidetracked, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. There's so many topics on this.
And you're just like, what was I talking about?
Yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, there's two sides of that coin. Whenever you can't really talk about gun control without talking about prohibition, because it's two forms of the government trying to control what you do with your property. But yeah, no, I agree. I don't think guns are a vice. I think that guns are for some people, guns might be a vice. For gang members, for police officers, they're a vice, I think, because they're control freaks and they need their little magic tool to make people, this makes people do what I want. No, I agree that most people, I have to say that being pro-gun does not mean I'm pro-Yosemite Sam's running around the street shooting guns into the air and shooting at anything that moves. It means that I'm for guns. It doesn't mean that I'm for gun violence. And I definitely, to the utmost aspect, I advocate responsible gun ownership. But yeah, it all comes down to individuals have no right to tell other individuals what to do with their property, and there is not a victim until there's a victim. So I don't believe in preemptively charging people with crimes. That's why I don't support drunk driving laws. I know that's an unpopular opinion for some people, but I don't support drunk driving laws because people can drive drunk all the time and nobody ends up getting hurt. And yes, sometimes people do drive drunk and they hurt people. That doesn't mean that I think drunk driving is cool or good. I don't think that you should drive drunk. That's not an activity that I condone. I don't. But a lot of people have this tendency to say, well, if you're not for drunk driving laws, it could only be for the reason that you like to drive drunk and you don't want to get in trouble for doing it. No, that's not like that. It's just because you think that I don't advocate laws means I want to engage in that behavior. That's just, you're doing it wrong. It just means that I advocate people's freedom not to be persecuted for anything until they've done it, not before they've done it. Well, you were driving drunk, you could have hurt someone, so now you're going to jail and you owe us money. Or you were doing drugs and you could have, done something to somebody, and now we're just going to put you in jail for it. And just the same, it's all the same to me. There's not a victim until there's a victim, and you don't, I just don't. It just all comes down to being an anarchist. You don't try to control the behaviors of others when it's not affecting you. Not because it has the potential to affect you. I understand being kind of nervous about it and at least aware of people's behavior, but that doesn't mean that you have any right to vote for men with guns and fancy uniforms to go around and kidnap people and throw them in cages because they're engaging in an activity that you disagree with and that you believe could lead to some sort of undesirable act against you, whether or not the data concludes that or not. And that's the deal with gun control proponents, is they think that if I take away people's guns, it'll make me more safe. No, it won't make you more safe, because just like you said, people are going to go out and kill people. You can't prevent that. The best thing you can do is at least make sure that those people are well armed to defend themselves if something like that should happen. So you're not solving any problems with the legislation and all the laws and regulations and all the full-blown statism. All you're doing is creating unnecessary victims of the state. That's all you're doing, and creating revenue sources for the state.
Yeah, I remembered what I was going for earlier. All right, so you were talking about aggression by the state, and that's absolutely correct, because it's just voluntary interaction, voluntary cooperation between between a buyer and a seller. They're just exchanging property, and whether a buyer imbibes that property or not is up to him. And so he's basically, in effect, aggressing against himself, which is totally moral. It's neither moral or immoral, actually. It's just, it just is. And so that person should be able to do what he wants with his property. Now, when the state interferes, it is aggression. That is the initiation of the use of force against voluntary interaction. It's just like taxation. It's the same principle. It's a theft, and in this case, it would be a theft of time. I think, because the state will try to take their guns and all that, but in effect, they're going to jail the buyer and the seller, and therefore steal their time, their life. Or part of their life, and that's theft, that's aggression, that's immoral. That's where I'm coming from on that. And I was thinking we could talk about like roads in general, later. I think that makes sense. We were both bringing up ideas on roads. Who would build the roads in this?
The roads.
But I mean, what else do you want to talk about with this topic?
I think on this topic, I think I said about everything I needed to say. I just don't advocate telling people what to do with their property when they're not hurting anyone. And I definitely agree with you. And I've actually never thought of it that way before. It's a theft of time. Jailing someone for a victimless crime, you're stealing their time. You're also stealing their money, as every time you get a charge,
True.
at least in Oregon anyway, and probably in everywhere, every time you get a charge, you get a certain amount of money tacked onto it that you now owe the court system, the county court system. That's extortion, because you didn't commit any crimes against them, you didn't aggress on them in any way. They just decided this arbitrary amount of money that you owe them for having the wrong type of plant in your pocket, or having the wrong kind of gun that they didn't say that you could have, or driving faster than they decided that you can. So it's all bullshit. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
we
forget
can
how I forget how this works, but I believe that if you get a charge and it's not dropped, but it is like put on hold or something like that, and it's basically not counted against you, you can put a lien on it. And I forget how this works, but if something were to be, if you were charged again and accused of something incorrectly or something, they have to pay you. But I feel like that's wrong. But I keep on hearing about that. Anyway.
I haven't heard about that. I've never heard about anything like that. Only I have heard about if you're accused of a crime and you're put in jail for it, or even if you're charged of a crime and you're kept in jail longer than they said you were supposed to. I know you can sue the county and the state for wrongful incarceration. So yeah, you can do that. I've never heard of taking liens out against charges against you, because that just wouldn't make sense.
They try to revoke it or something, and
other than revoking your status and suspended sentences, you still have to pay them all the money, though. It's basically, it's like them saying, well, we're going to give you, this happened to a friend of mine. He was supposed to get 18 months in jail. He did 4 months. He got out on probation, and they gave him a 1-year suspended sentence and said, you pay all your probation fees, all your court fines, all your restitution, do everything we tell you to do, and you just have to pay us all the money. But if you screw up, you're going to go back to jail for a year at any time. So I know they do that, but which is just another way of hanging, just extorting people and dangling things, especially since he didn't hurt anyone either. His was a complete victimless crime also.
Right.
So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, we can talk about the roads if you want. I know we probably got about 15 minutes left.
A little bit better than that, but yeah. At first, since we have a break in the show, I just want to go over the prices on silver, gold, and Bitcoin tonight. And these prices were taken at 9:06 on Monday. The 9th is tonight. 9:06 on Monday. So silver is 1904. Gold is 1252.70, and Bitcoin is about 670 from what I saw. And I do want to mention that I've noticed trends in my past show. I noticed that prices tend to go down in these areas, silver and gold and hard money. They tend to go down. I believe that it's because people take money out of silver and gold and go back into dollars in order to go on vacation. That's always been my guess. And so far, there's like a summer dip, and then it tends to shoot up in September and then drop back down a little bit. So, but basically over time, yes, it all slowly goes up. There's this like an exponential curve going on, and it's at the rate of 3% or something. So that would be more palabaric or something like that, whatever that is. Anyway, so just food for thought. Getting back into the roads, since we were talking about that. So the idea in Anarchy would be for roads to be owned by private companies. Potentially, those companies would be managed and operated by those who currently are operating these roads. It's just that it wouldn't be there wouldn't be this layer of force. There wouldn't be a bureaucracy. There wouldn't be taxation. None of that. And so the roads would be owned. Yes, the property, the land, would be owned by those companies, and those roads would be paved over or whatever they want to do with the area that they were given. Yeah, so there may be what we think of as rules. They might turn into just, what we think of now as laws would be turned into rules, for, operating your car on a road. Speed limit might be the same, 25 in this area, 50 in this area. But it would be operated by a business, and they will have better control over, or they'll understand the dynamics of this piece of land, what should the speed limit actually be, as opposed to just forced down by what a few people that arrogantly think that they know better, they just put down, oh, this is 25, no matter what. Walter Block was talking at one point, I don't remember when or which video, but he was saying that, oh, maybe this lane should be 70 miles an hour, and this lane should be 45 miles an hour. How do we know? We can only find out through experiment. And what do we know? Maybe we can assign 2 lanes to be non-texting and driving, and make the 3rd lane texting and driving for those that want to be stupid. Maybe that's a good idea. Who knows? But we don't also know if roads would exist. That's where I'm coming from. Drunk driving. Maybe some people want to be stupid and drunk drive. Hey, do it in this lane. It's okay. You can, cause an accident if you want. But fewer people. I'm sorry?
You could put up bumpers on the lanes.
Yeah, bumpers. And you know what I was thinking of? You ever seen Jurassic Park, where they have those cars that have this little rail in the center of the wheels? Like you're driving along the path and you have to stay on the road, and you have to go along this route. Yeah, I think why not use that rail or some, something like that. It would be hard to turn onto a different street, but hey, maybe the business will think of something like that. Yeah. I don't know.
No, that's a good point. That's a really good point. My whole stance on it, I think those are all actually really good ideas. Having the different lanes for different things, and if people want to text and drive or drunk and drive. Basically, if you want to drive dangerously and be an asshole and not pay attention, go in this lane over here, and then you can all crash into each other, and we'll be fine over here. Nobody needs to make any money off of it. You guys worry about paying for all that stuff, but we don't need to involve the car insurance companies and the police who are going to charge you with a litany of crazy crimes that are all basically the same way of different ways of saying the same thing. But
with that lane thing, I was thinking, let's say you want to text and drive and you go into that one lane. Well, you just put up a notice on that lane saying, hey, all liability will be yours, not ours. Because in that sense, the state doesn't take liability right now. The liability is on us. So, right, but businesses will. They are, it's almost understood that businesses on their property will take liability because it's their property. So that's how restaurants and bars operate. They have to be liable for those that are driving drunk or whatever, to some degree, because it is their property. Once you leave the property, it shouldn't be their problem anymore, but still. Anyway, the idea is when you're on someone's land, they can kick you out. That's the thing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just disagree with the fact that you should be held liable for something that someone else did just because they were on your property. You didn't kick them out for doing so.
Yeah,
But
and we might disagree on that, but that's down the road. You know what I mean?
down the road, that's out
Get
of here.
it? Get
Yeah.
it?
No, I think it's the funniest though because statists always say, whenever I bring up the fact that taxation is theft, that it's by its very definition the extortion of my wages from me under the threat of violence. They always bring up the fact, well, you enjoy certain social programs, which I don't actually, but
Mm.
certain aspects of society that are paid for through taxation, which aren't, because taxation doesn't actually pay for any of that. It goes to paying back the Federal Reserve bank loans. All the money's already been issued, but that's a whole other story. They always bring up the roads. They always say, well, who's going to quit driving on our roads then? You're an anarchist, you're a libertarian, you think taxes are theft, stop driving on the roads. Who in your little anarchist utopia is going to build the roads? And I always say, what kind of, is that a real question? Like the same people who built them the first time, because I believe it's over 60% of between 60 and 70% of the original roads that were built in this country were not done so by government or at the whim of government. They were built by private enterprises because in order to have trade, you need trade routes, you need roads. So businesses, I saw an article not too long ago that where somebody was responding to something Barack Obama said about the government building roads enables businesses to trade to trade goods and services with one another. Basically enables them to travel to expand their business, because obviously you can't have a business without commerce and travel. You need to ship your products. You need to be able to reach your customers. You need to so all that. You need roads for all that. And he said that because government built the roads, that enabled the business sector to grow, because they then traveled these roads to expand their businesses. It's actually the opposite. The businesses, the people that were in the private business sector, basically the roads were built by privately owned companies and private enterprise because they needed the roads to conduct their trade. So that goes back to the whole demand will provide supply. People needed their products, that were demanding their products. They needed a way to get the products to those people. So once again, the market came through, was responsible for a lot of the original roads being built in the first place. So they act as if everyone doesn't have an equal interest in having roads built and maintained. Everybody uses roads. Everybody needs them to get somewhere. So it's not as if government just disappeared tomorrow and taxes went away. People would say, well, screw the roads. Like, I'm not paying for those roads. No, everybody's going to pay for the roads. Everybody's going to have them worked on, built when we need new ones, maintained, because everyone has a vested interest in using roads. Everyone from the private sector to everyday ordinary citizens who need the road to drive to their grocery store instead of going off, a 7-mile hike through the woods. It's just not realistic. So that's,
Yeah, like some people wonder how we're going to pay for the roads. And my thing is, it doesn't matter, but yeah, there are multiple ways that could be done in the future. Right now, even in the public sector, they're using easy passes, or things that you can allow you to pay on the fly on a highway. And we could use something similar to that for every point of entry on a road or whatever. But there are also ideas where you could pay monthly to use a certain road, or have a business maintain a group of roads, or maybe there will be like a group of companies that will come together like a guild and have people pay through this guild or something like that. I mean, there's multiple ways to do it. We don't care, though. The idea is to get rid of the state from the road because we're paying for it through taxation. So in effect, everybody's using it, even if they don't want to use it. Or say they're walking on the sidewalk, they're not driving on the road. What about those people? They're trying to save money. They're still paying for the road through taxation.
Yeah.
So there's just this immorality, this use of force from the state that makes us pay whether we want to or not. However it looks like in the future is irrelevant, in my opinion. But that's always the big argument. Who's going to pay, or who's going to pay for the roads, or who's going to pay those businesses, and who's going to actually build the roads? It's absolutely nuts.
Yeah, and it's a ridiculous and completely immoral argument in and of itself, because basically they're asking, if not for us threatening you with violence and forcing you to, do things our way, how would they get done?
Right.
And that's just ridiculous, it's without the violence. Believe it or not, you don't need the violence. You don't need the coercion. There's always a way to do something without violence or coercion. Actually, violence and coercion is never an answer. You never use force or violence on people or extort them to get them to comply to what your idea of social order should be or anything. You don't use violence to get your way. We talked about that on the last show. This being an anarchist show, we'll probably talk about it many times to come. So you don't use force and violence to get your way, and that's exactly what government and legislation is. And having, all you're doing by having government allocate these things for you that you could be allocating yourselves, all you're doing is involving an unnecessary aspect of violence and an unnecessary threat. You're putting yourselves as a society at risk to be enslaved by statism and by government.
Yeah, you're actually being forced to pay for something. And people make that argument about the healthcare law that was just passed a couple years ago. And it's the same thing. So people were saying, oh, we've never been told we have to buy anything. Yes, you've been buying something for at least 150 years. You've been paying for the roads. I mean, you don't think of it like that right now, but that's because we're not accustomed to it anymore as a society, or whatever you want to call it. So, once we break that mindset, and actually, eventually, we'll have to do it. We'll have to have businesses do these roads, or whatever will come about, however we transport ourselves. Eventually, it will have to come about, because technology is going and improving faster than the government can keep up with it. I saw a video where a road was being built with bricks with this massive machine. It just drives forward and drops bricks in a nice pattern, and that's technology right there. I wish we had things like that over here in the United States. I forget where this was, but anyway, I thought it was phenomenal. But you don't see that because it's socialized roads. You don't think of it like that either, but yes, that's exactly what we have right now. It's socialized roads.
And that's the bottom line, is people always act like, well, if government didn't do this and government didn't do that, then what if? Then who's going to do it? And they don't, what they're not talking about is government doesn't do anything in and of itself, because government isn't even real. It's just an idea. It's not a thing. It's a concept. It's a group of individuals. All they're doing is allocating these things to be done for you, which you could be allocating yourself. It's not a matter of who will build the roads, because private businesses built the roads before, private businesses built the roads now, and they will build the roads in the future. It's all about where the money's coming from and how it's allocated. And I gotta believe that there's a better way to do that than holding guns to everyone's head and forcing them to do it. Who's not gonna pay for roads to be built and maintained? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, that the idea to think that if people aren't forced to do something that's in their best interest, they're not going to do it. Children maybe won't do that. Children under the age of 10 maybe might not do something that's in their best interest if they're not forced to, like brushing their teeth and stuff. But perfect analogy. It's like somebody saying, if government didn't force you at gunpoint to brush your teeth, then you might not do it, and then we'd have all this dental disease and all that. And it's like, no, I'm gonna brush my teeth because it's in my best interest.
Right.
I'm gonna go to the dentist and I'm gonna go see doctors because it's in my best interest to stay alive as an individual, and it's in our best interest to stay alive as a species.
Right.
So, yeah, that idea is just ridiculous. People don't need to be forced to do something with violence that's in their best interest. It's just a bit from a business perspective. It's just the government is a business that's figured out a way to make a lot of money off of a lot of people by doing all these things for them that they could be doing for themselves. And it's just insane. It's total insanity.
In essence, it comes down to arrogance and the use of fear. You know, the arrogance of those small group of individuals and those outside of the government that think that the government can do better. That's arrogance. And the fear, because the government and media instill this fear in people in order to, you know, facilitate that arrogance.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think we got to wrap that up now.
Okay.
Yeah, so information is the currency of anarchy. If you'd like to be a part of the discussion during our live taping, come check us out on Sundays, right, Thomas? Sundays, normally?
What?
Sundays.
We will be doing Sundays, the live recording. The show doesn't actually go on the network, though, until Wednesdays. Wednesdays from 12 to 1 here, so it'll be 3 to 4 where you're at. It will be up on the network.
Good stuff. Yeah, so check that out. You can check our live feed at youtube.com/user/Cur of Anarchy. And if you'd like to see the final products, yes, it's at Voluntary Virtues, youtube.com/user/Voluntary Virtues on Wednesdays. So, anyway, thank you very much, Thomas. I'll see you soon.
All right, always a pleasure. See you next week, man.
All right, take care.
All right, bye.